Ratings have gone from bad to worse for Pat McAfee. You could even make a strong case. Pat McAfee's ratings, they're on the verge of going from almost nothing to nothing. And I have a feeling it is only going to get worse. In terms of ratings, it could be a long summer for ESPN and Pat McAfee. Now, there is no denying the fact Pat McAfee, absolute superstar in sports media. He crosses over into multiple areas. Primary focus is the NFL and college football. Pat McAfee's involved with the WWE, so he reaches their young audience along with the group of unmarried men who are still watching the WWE in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. You know, the WWE is such a unique, polarizing brand. I can't think of another show on television that is designed to attract kids, and at the same time, it attracts grown men who should have grown out of watching professional wrestling 20 years ago. And these dudes, they are passionate. They are passionate about their professional wrestling. They get all emotional on Twitter when their favorite wrestler isn't scripted to win its match. And look, that's no disrespect. I grew up watching the WWF. I grew up during the Attitude Era. Key word though, I grew up. Anyway, be sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below if you're a grown man who still watches the WWE and you think I'm an asshole for saying what I just said. There's no denying the fact, Pat McAfee, superstar in sports media, but just because you're high profile, just because you're controversial, that does not mean it's going to translate into television ratings. Skip Bayless is high profile. Skip Bayless, extremely polarizing. You know what else Skip Bayless is? On the verge of cancellation. He is at serious risk of seeing his career in sports media come to an end. Matter of fact, I'm thinking about adding Skip Bayless to the Rise and Fall series here on the channel. Still working on the WNBA part. I've had some personal things come up recently and haven't been able to get the WNBA documentary completed, but thinking about adding Skip Bayless to the series. The difference, though, between Pat McAfee and Skip Bayless actually had a meteoric rise in television. Skip consistently drew high ratings on ESPN for a decade, while Pat McAfee ain't coming anywhere close. Now, in fairness to Pat McAfee, his show's only been airing on ESPN for about 7 months now. If ratings continue on this current trajectory, I don't know if Pat McAfee's going to make it through the end of his contract with the worldwide leader in woke. To their credit, ESPN was smart with their timing launching the Pat McAfee Show. They debuted in September as college football and the NFL seasons were kicking off. Pat McAfee's a former NFL player. Well, he's a former NFL punter. Some people don't really consider kickers and punters to be actual NFL players, but either way, Pat McAfee was talented enough to make it to the league, and the primary focus of his show is talking about football. That is literally the premise of the show. Pat McAfee and his boodle buddies sitting around talking football. When the show launched on ESPN in September, the ratings sucked. I mean, they sucked. ESPN spent the entire summer promoting the Pat McAfee Show. Thousands and thousands of dollars were spent promoting the show. Debut episode, Pat McAfee, 228,000 viewers. Throughout football season, Pat McAfee was averaging around 300,000 an episode on ESPN. Now, I don't think I have to sit here and explain how atrocious that number is. And you got to remember, this dude gets all the high-profile guests. Back in September, he was doing a live show in Boulder, Colorado. This was during the peak of Deion Sanders' popularity last season. In a single episode, Pat McAfee, he had Deion Sanders, The Rock, and Aaron Rodgers all on the same show. And yet somehow, Pat McAfee is still failing to resonate with ESPN's audience. His best month was in January when he averaged 382,000 viewers. We are trending in the right direction! This is amazing! Woohoo! Yes, yes, yes. I'm sure there were celebrations of rainbows and woke wieners throughout the worldwide leader in woke. Executives at ESPN who thought it was a good idea to recruit Pat McAfee, I'm sure they felt a little validated that viewership was trending in the right direction. But then came February. Ratings crashed to an average of 295,000 viewers, with Pat McAfee taking the last 2 weeks of the month off. Now, ESPN claimed that Pat McAfee was just on vacation, but my inside sources tell me ESPN had to get him admitted to Woke Memorial Hospital to treat him for the beating he took in the ratings last month. But that's okay. That's okay. March is a brand new month. March is typically a good month for sports talk radio and television. After the Super Bowl in February, the rest of the month is pretty much dead when it comes to sports news. Well, Casey, that's not true. The NBA All-Star Game is in February. So? No one cares about the NBA All-Star Game. Hell, Adam Silver, he can't even get NBA players to give a shit about that polished dump. But the news cycle, it picks up during the month of March. Obviously, we have March Madness. Later this week, Katie Rue Clark, she'll start the beginning of the end of her professional basketball career. Poor Caitlin Clark. I mean, it's all downhill from here. I hope she enjoys the amenities. I hope she enjoys the chartered airfare and 5-star hotel over these next couple of weeks, because this time next year, Caitlin Clark, she's going to be traveling in Greyhound buses and riding the back of a garbage truck in the WNBA dump. March is also a busy time for the NBA. Teams are fighting for playoff positioning. Right now, the two biggest stars in the NBA, they're at risk of missing the playoffs altogether. There's plenty to talk about in the month of March. It's a good time for sports radio and television. So, how is Pat McAfee performing? Through the first 2 weeks of March, Pat McAfee's averaging 289,000 viewers on ESPN. Are you starting to notice a trend here? He went from 300,000 during the NFL regular season. He peaked in January with 382,000. That number is still the definition of suck. That number would still qualify Pat McAfee for the upcoming Huge Embarrassing Failure Awards, but 382,000. That was his personal best while working at the worldwide leader in woke. Since then, his ratings are declining every month, and I have a feeling it's only going to get worse. Where will Pat McAfee be in June, July, and August? Ratings declined throughout sports television during the summer, but shows like First Take, PTI, they have a foundational audience. They can absorb the decline. Pat McAfee don't have that luxury. If his ratings continue their decline, they'll be too low to be measured. It's going to get to a point, and this might be happening already, but it's going to get to a point where executives at ESPN, they're going to start asking themselves, is Pat McAfee really worth the trouble? You know, ESPN really fucked themselves when they broke the bank for Pat McAfee. I mean, the deal was great for Patty. He's being paid $17 million a year to not deliver, but what his salary did, it overvalued everyone else at ESPN. The worldwide leader in woke, they just paid Ryan Clark $3 million a year. I would imagine that Stephen A. Smith is going to command over $20 million. God only knows what Shannon Sharpe is going to ask for. Hey, it's me, Shay Shay. This is no bullshit. Shannon Sharpe, he is the biggest star right now at ESPN. I'm being serious. Shannon Sharpe is a bigger star right now than Stephen A. Smith. If you don't believe me, go look at ratings for First Take on Monday and Tuesday when it's the bromance between Shay and A. Compare those ratings to what Stephen A. Smith draws the rest of the week with his rotating panel of shitfucks along with JJ Redick and Chris Russo. The grown man who calls himself Shay, his current contract with ESPN, I believe it expires after the NBA playoffs. They're paying Pat McAfee $17 million. He's drawing less than 300,000. How much is Shannon Sharpe going to demand for drawing 800,000? Like I said, it's going to get to the point where executives at ESPN start asking themselves, is Pat McAfee really worth it? Have you ever heard that saying, death by a thousand cuts? It's often used when talking about relationships, whether business or personal. Most relationships, they don't end because something drastic happened. Most relationships don't end because of one or two major events. The vast majority of relationships, they slowly decline over time. Minor cut here, minor cut there. Every week, maybe every 2 weeks, another small cut. By the time you get to the end of the year, you run out of places to cut. Is that happening between Pat McAfee and ESPN? Let's just look at recent events and you tell me. Yesterday, the Wall Street Journal, they published a report where they interviewed Jimmy Pitaro, president of ESPN. They asked him about Aaron Rodgers joking that Jim Kimmel was on the list of Jeff Epstein. Jimmy Pitaro told the Wall Street Journal that he reprimanded Pat McAfee privately about what he described as Aaron Rodgers spreading a conspiracy theory. Now, normal people, we called it a joke. President of the worldwide leader in woke, he calls it a conspiracy theory. Several days later, though, Pat McAfee, he announced that Aaron Rodgers would not be returning to his show. A couple of days after that, Aaron Rodgers mysteriously returns to the show. Guess who didn't know about Aaron Rodgers returning? Jimmy Pitaro. He told the Wall Street Journal, "I was not aligned with Pat McAfee on that issue." Minor cut. Couple of weeks ago, Pat McAfee, he was involved in a heated exchange with Stephen A. Smith. He called Stephen A. a motherfucker, and it was reported that Stephen A. had banned Pat McAfee from First Take. Now, they have since made up and embraced in a passionate woke hug, but this was another minor cut. Remember when Pat McAfee verbally demolished ESPN executive Norby Williamson? Once again, Jimmy Pitaro had to privately reprimand Pat McAfee about that. Another minor cut. Anytime his ratings are a topic of conversation in the media, ESPN feels forced to issue a press release defending Pat McAfee. They have to find all these creative ways to twist the ratings to make it seem like it's not a big deal that Pat McAfee is losing 50% of the First Take audience. There was that poll, I think it was conducted by The Athletic, where the overwhelming majority of ESPN's audience detest Pat McAfee on College Game Day. Another minor cut. Sure, it has been relatively quiet with Pat McAfee over the last 6, 7, maybe even 8 weeks, but he was off work for 2 of those weeks. How long will it be until the next controversy? How long will it be before executives at ESPN are once again having to publicly defend Pat McAfee? The more important question is, how long can this go on? How long will this be worth it for ESPN? This show is incredibly expensive to produce. The show it replaced SportsCenter, cheap to produce, and it was drawing significantly higher ratings. Do not be surprised if Pat McAfee is averaging less than 250,000 viewers by July. And don't be surprised if Pat McAfee doesn't see the end of his contract with ESPN. But you tell me, how long can this go on? How long will this relationship last between ESPN and Pat McAfee? Publicly, everyone is acting like everything is all good, but there's got to be a level of concern here, right? I mean, both sides have to be concerned. It's abundantly clear this ain't working out. How long can it go on? Will Pat McAfee see the end of his contract with ESPN? You tell me, sound off in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share the video. I appreciate each one of you guys and your continued support. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys tomorrow.